Valerya Edelman is a social activist, a drug and alcohol counselor, and a social worker who has worked in mental health and addiction since 1998. Today, she joins us to talk about Fredericton City's Planning Advisory Committee's opposition to the city's plan to build a new correctional facility in Vanier Industrial Zone. Here's what she has to say.
The province, specifically the Department of Justice and Public Safety, they have an application to build a new correctional facility, which is a jail in the Vanier Industrial Park. And so the application first went to City Council, and it was voted. There were 4 councillors who voted against the application initially, but they were outvoted. And so then the application went to the Planning Advisory Committee. So at the Planning Advisory Committee, the applicant, who was from the Department of Justice and Public Safety, kind of gave a pitch of why the correctional facility would be a good idea. And then there were many people who spoke against it. The chair of the PAC committee said they received like over 80 letters in opposition of the application. And over 20 of those letters came from people who lived near the Vanier Industrial Park. So like in the Lincoln area.
Okay. And
there were many people who spoke against the application at the PAC meeting. And it was interesting because, the Planning Advisory Committee was like, we're just talking about land use. We're just talking about land use. We're not going to get into whether prisons or jails are a good thing or a bad thing. We're just going to talk about land use. But there were many people who spoke up and said that, you can't just talk about a prison or a jail without talking about what happens there, right? The city staff was saying, well, this is a warehouse district, so it's appropriate for a jail. But a jail is not like a warehouse that stores sheet metal, right? Incarcerating people is different than a warehouse that stores sheet metal. So there were many people who were urging the PAC committee to really look at, what is the jail? What are the harms? What's the harms that it can cause? So that was an interesting meeting. There were also some like specific land use issues too. Like they were talking about because the airport's nearby, whether or not planes could fly over the jail. And there was they were talking too, there's going to be a multi-purpose trail going from Lincoln to Vanier Park. So a lot of the residents of Lincoln didn't really want to have a trail that led to a jail. Some of them talked about their property values. Many talked just about not wanting to live near a jail.
Right. So some of the Lincoln residents are clearly opposed to this idea. Are they just concerned about social implications, or they also worry that their market value of their homes will go down if the jail is built next to their locality?
Yeah, good question. So I attended the PAC meeting, and I listened to everyone who spoke, and I believe like most of the people who were residents spoke about both. They're like, you know what, this is like a family neighborhood. We didn't really want to have a jail in our family neighborhood. Also, there's like a lot of social implications to jails. It's not effective. It's a really outdated, barbaric way of treating social issues. Many people who were in the Lincoln area were against the jail, not just because of their property value. Yeah.
Right.
I'll say
And,
most, yeah.
and yet the government keeps insisting that there's this issue of overcrowding in existing jails in Fredericton. How do you view this logic, or what the government is trying to say to implement this project?
Yeah, so there's the concern about the overcrowding in the jail in St. John, and also like the transportation they have to do from like St. John to the north, and Fredericton would be right in the middle. And there are other solutions. There are better solutions than building another jail. So the one interesting thing I know at the PAC meeting that was said by the Department of Justice and Public Safety was the average stay in jail was between 30 to 33 days. So it's not like it's a long time if you're in isolation in jail. That's very damaging. But it also tells us that the crimes of most of the people are being jailed for in those provincial jails are not like ones that have a high victimization. Like for 30 days, it's not a high victimization. So there could be many different strategies to reduce crime, to reduce the jail occupancy. So there are some other strategies that would be better. Would be to look at like kind of the root cause of the problems, and also kind of honestly to like actually support a lot of the people who are going to jail. So as a social worker, I have spent quite a bit of time in a courthouse as a support person. As an advocate, I bring a letter saying, yeah, this person did their community hours. And how the jail works is, or the courthouse works is, you're told a time and you just have to sit there and wait until your name is called. So you could sit there for 2 or 3 hours. And, every time I go into the Fredericton courthouse, the people who are there are the most really disenfranchised people, right? They're clearly living in poverty. Many are very clearly mentally ill. And, in their crimes, I mean, sometimes it's like, breaching a probation order. I mean, they didn't meet their PO, their probation officer. And some, the theft too, like it's really looks like survival. And, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't be accountable for wrongdoings. I think it's just a better way to really invite people to take responsibility for wrongdoings and change their behavior. Like going to a jail, people aren't going to learn like how to do differently. They're not going to figure out how to,
Right.
how to manage anything. So, other alternatives would be things like, prevention. So people who are like in schools or, in other, families who are in need, offer them enough support, and harm reduction. And we have a really great harm reduction recovery center in Fredericton, the Riverstone Recovery Center. However, without harm reduction oriented housing, that program can't reach its full potential. So housing is huge, and many people have said this. There's so many people are saying this. And treatment centers, we don't have any like live-in treatment centers in Fredericton. So that's another one too. And opportunities, right? So if people are recovering from substance use related issues, so if they're recovering from substance use, which may have been related to what brought them to jail in the first place, what are they going to do after? Like, what are the opportunities for them, right? So we kind of build those kind of strategies.
Yeah.
Like most of the, I mean, a lot of the, the crimes that people are being arrested for are related to substance use, and even, selling drugs. I mean, most people who I see in the courthouse, when they're like selling the drugs, like that, they're only selling enough to make enough money so they can, meet their own addiction needs.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to really do something about that, we need to offer folks support, offer them harm reduction services, offer them, a treatment center, offer them opportunities after. Otherwise, it's just a revolving door to jail,
Mm-hmm.
which is very expensive and damaging and not helpful for anyone.
Right. Why do you think the government has, chosen this particular site? Is there any logic behind it, or, maybe it's accessible for them? Like, do you see any logic behind it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I always like to kind of see, what's the other side. I don't want to just be like in an echo chamber. This is what I believe. I'm like, okay, what is your side? And like so far, they haven't really stated. I mean, I haven't heard anything from the provincial government that really convinced me, even in the most smallest way at all, that there's a logic behind it. I heard Chris Austin like kind of quoted something about, even though whatever the data shows about crime, it's not relevant because what he's hearing from people who he's talking to, right? So, I mean, I wonder who they're talking to, whose voices are being privileged in those meetings. I can imagine the Blaine Higgs or Chris Austin or the government going, we have a problem and we need to do something about it. And maybe they're like, okay, let's do this. And really not looking at the evidence that it's not effective in reducing crime and it's really damaging. Right. And so I don't know if it's that they're making their choices or they're moving because of like logic or just kind of maybe some old thoughts that they've had, like very simplistic. Okay, they did something bad, let's put them in jail. And didn't really kind of develop any, more like an in-depth kind of, thinking about the situation. Yeah.
Right. So the Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation will go to the City Council, I think, this January 9th, 2023, for second and third readings. And the application would need 8-4 vote in favor by council to pass. What do you think will happen? Like, will they get enough votes to pass the application?
Oh, I hope they don't have enough votes to pass the application. I really hope. I don't know. I'm not going to take it for granted one way or another. I think this is a really crucial time for people in Fredericton to speak up about this, because jails are not a benign thing. It's not just a bad decision or ineffective decision by the province. A jail could really cause damage and harm to like the individuals, families, also Fredericton overall. I mean, I'll give you an example. So, the Department of Justice and Public Safety at the PAC meeting said that they don't just open up the gates and and release the prisoners like in the movies. And he's boasting about this, about the safety. And he says, we drive them to, a place they could stay, or the shelter, right? And like, that's the plan. They're going to release people and drive them to the shelter in Fredericton. What does that mean for people like living in Fredericton? Like, what does that mean for city council, right? We kind of need to think critically about that. we also need to think critically about the about the health of prisoners, and all the data shows how things like communicable diseases are like much higher in the prison population.
Right.
So we're going to have this population in Fredericton that are sicker, right?
Mhm.
And they will be released. So what does that mean for people living in Fredericton? So really kind of think that people need to speak up to the council. I don't know if they're going to come to the conclusions, if they're going to make the connection, they're going to connect the dots about how the jail will harm Fredericton without people kind of speaking up.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we'll see what happens. About the population health in jail too. So the applicant, at the PAC meeting said that Horizon Health are going to be responsible for healthcare delivery to the prisoners in the jail. And our healthcare system is already stretched so thin.
Right.
So this is really what we're going to do, like this, and this is not just about the province not having, the province not having an effective solution. This is something that's going to really affect the people who are living in Fredericton. And the city council really needs to hear that. So.
Okay. So is it their recommendation, or is the Health Horizon already on board to do that?
I don't know how it happened, but the applicant at the PAC meeting, they said that was already a done deal. It sounded like a kind of jurisdictional issue, but I'm not really sure how that works. But they were like, yeah, no, we don't deliver healthcare. That's Horizon. So yeah. So their plan is dropping people off at the shelter, Horizon providing like healthcare. Like it's not good all around. And it would be, I think, important to also remind council that incarceration is not the same as storing sheet metal in a warehouse. It's really damaging to people.
Okay, last question. As a social worker, like what would you tell the government, like what should they focus instead or invest the money to make lives of Fredericton better?
Yeah, I think the province needs to invest more in harm reduction oriented housing, treatment centers like alcohol and drug treatment centers, and opportunities for people who are in recovery from substance use. So people who have done drugs or still using drugs have opportunities for them to participate in society. Yeah.
Thank you so much for giving your time today.
Okay, thank you.
And that was Valerya Edelman, who joined us today to talk about the provincial government's plan to build a new correctional facility in Fredericton City's Vanier Industrial Zone. She gave us a very meaningful insight as what social and economic impact the new correctional facility will have, and requested the government to invest that money on social development. For the NB Media Co-op, this is Arun Budathoki.